The next perspective that we'll be discussing is the perspective that stems out of learning theories. Learning theories argue that human development is shaped largely by reactions from the person's environment. They focus on how learning influences a person's behavior. This perspective emphasizes the role of experience and that people learn from watching others around them. There are two influential theories in this perspective, and those are behaviorism and social learning theory. First, let's start with behaviorism. Behaviorism was really a reaction against Freud. The school of thought stresses the need for psychology to be an objective science. In other words, psychology should be a science based on observable and only observable events, not the unconscious or conscious mind. So behaviorism involves two types of conditioning. First is classical conditioning. Classical conditioning was first proposed and studied by Ivan Pavlov with his dogs. Classical conditioning is one form of learning in which an organism learns through establishing associations between different events and stimuli. For example, when a neutral stimulus, such as a bell, is paired with an unconditioned stimulus, such as food, which produces some involuntary bodily response all on its own, such as salivating, the neutral stimulus begins to trigger a response by the organism similar to that produced by the unconditioned stimulus. In this way, the organism has learned that the neutral stimulus equals something good, just like the unconditioned stimulus. Any stimulus we can perceive has the potential to become a conditioned stimulus. So in Pavlov's example, the neutral stimulus, the bell, was paired with food. Food was the unconditioned stimulus. After the pairing took place, the bell now became a conditioned stimulus that then triggered a conditioned response, salivation. If anyone's familiar with The Office, there's an episode where Jim is trying to classically condition Dwight. You guys can look this up on YouTube. But he does this by turning his computer on and offering Dwight an Altoid. So when his computer boots on, it bings. And so in the video, Jim offers the unconditioned stimulus, which would be, hey, Dwight, do you want an Altoid? This elicits an unconditioned response, which would be that salivation. And then the conditioning pairs the unconditioned stimulus, do you want an Altoid, with a neutral stimulus, and that's the computer bing. After conditioning, the now conditioned stimulus, the computer bing, produces the conditioned response, salivation. The other type of conditioning that stems out of behaviorism is operant conditioning. So this comes from B.F. Skinner. Skinner asserts that behavior is determined by environmental reinforcers and punishments. Operant conditioning is a type of learning in which a behavior is strengthened, meaning it will occur more frequently when it's followed by a reinforcement. It's weakened, meaning it will happen less frequently when it's followed by a punishment. Operant conditioning is based on a simple premise that behavior is influenced by the consequences that follow. When you are reinforced for doing something, you're more likely to do it again. When you're punished for doing something, you're less likely to do it again. Now, I posted a handout on operant conditioning that you all really need to take a look at, because Reinforcements can either be positive or negative, and punishments can also be positive or negative. So what's important to remember is the positive and negative, it doesn't have an emotional tone to it. Positive here just means adding something. Negative means taking something away. So if you have a positive reinforcement, it means you're adding something good to make that behavior occur again. If you have a negative reinforcement, it still means that you want that behavior to occur again. So because it's negative, you're taking something away. But since you want the behavior to occur again, you're taking something bad away. If you have a positive punishment, it means you don't want the behavior to occur again. So you are adding, because it's positive, something bad. If it's a negative punishment, it means you're taking away something good because you don't want that behavior to occur again. So please take a look at that handout, and then also be sure that you do the activity where you come up with an example of positive reinforcements, negative reinforcements, positive punishments, and negative punishments. Another type of learning theory is social learning theory. And the idea here is that people change and learn by watching or imitating others and learning from other people's mistakes. So social learning theory is really based on this idea of observational learning or imitation. People learn by watching others. This is Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. So Bandura did this really famous Bobo doll experiment, and I really want you guys to watch that video. In the Bobo doll experiment, you can see that young children will model certain behaviors that they see from adults. What we see, though, is that imitation or modeling is more likely when the subject of observation is seen as smart, popular, or talented. It's also more likely when the subject of observation is rewarded for their behavior. Another thing that we see is that self-efficacy will play a role in determining whether or not a person will model behavior. So self-efficacy, the definition is people's beliefs about their own abilities and talents. So if someone, for example, has a really strong sense of self-efficacy with regard to playing basketball, for example, they're more likely to imitate a famous basketball player than someone who thinks, well, I'm not good at basketball at all, so I'm not going to imitate this basketball player. So again, Albert Bandura's social learning theory really emphasizes modeling as a powerful source of development. And we know that self-efficacy will determine when someone will try to imitate a behavior.